The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Remember that show back then? Remember that show? Turn on the TV, time was always flying. Why did they have to end? So many shows you forgotten. Now that we've got a podcast, we can release all the shows from our hands. Yeah, will you be the most TV dudes you'll ever listen to? As long as we keep on talking sitcoms and cartoons from back in the day. Okay, we confess we're obsessed, but we got a podcast to help you remember that show.
Hey there, TV lovers, and welcome to episode 22 of Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. I'm William Bruce West, and I'm ready to hit the beach after the sun goes down, that is.
And I'm Adam Pope, here to remind you that after this episode, nights will never be the same. We've entered October, and that means it's time to get a little scary with our programming choices here on Remember That Show. But first, we have to look back at the frights and delights of our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Theme Song.
Adam, the series we're talking about tonight goes from the safety of the sandy sunlight to the nightmares lurking in the darkness. There have been some pretty scary things broadcast on TV over the years. So what was your scariest TV viewing moment as a kid?
Yeah, this is the moment that TV betrayed me. Up to this point, TV was this glowing screen that was warmth and comfort and enjoyment. And then I remember one night when Child's Play was coming out in theaters, Entertainment Tonight was doing a behind-the-scenes segment on how the Chucky puppet was built and operated and all this stuff. And I didn't know anything about the movie, Chucky, any of that. I was only 6 years old at the time. So the concept of a killer doll just like freaked me out because I was like, my toys can betray me too. So even seeing that it was all fake, it didn't help relieve my anxiety. And I remember just like looking all around like the living room and the kitchen while that segment was playing, waiting for an adult to change the channel. I was like paralyzed with fear, but no one else was in the room. And I just felt like totally helpless, like Chucky's gonna get me. The only thing that came close to that was just a little later on when the It miniseries, was being broadcast on TV for the 2-night event. Both nights, I remember putting in the VHS tape, hitting record, and then running to my room to go to bed because I was only willing to watch it in daylight, probably on the weekend. I needed some time to calm down from what I had anticipated it would be. What about for you, Will?
I know it's supposed to be like horror, but like I've never been a horror person. I have a delicate sensibility. I can't go near that stuff. I like to think of myself as kind of grounded. Like I don't have crushes on supermodels. I have crushes on the girl at the bank, like things like that. So like with scary stuff, it was Stephen King's The Stand, like the miniseries, like not even like the recent one. I'm talking about the one with like Dauber from Coach and Molly Ringwald and Gary Sinise before Lieutenant Dan. To me, okay, you get into like the Randall Flagg aspects and all that stuff. Like it's Stephen King, is scary, whatever. That's not going to happen. But like a super flu that kills like 99% of the population, that scared the crap out of me. And I saw that when I was probably like 12 or 13. And I was probably like 20 when like I could get through a day without thinking like, is today the day? Is today the super flu day? Like I'm always looking like searching my surroundings. Where can I go like to hide rations? That's why like Walking Dead and all those things, I don't watch them because while I don't think there's going to be like a zombie apocalypse, there could be something very bad. And honestly, I probably don't want to survive it.
Wow, yeah, that's intense. The real world stuff. I will say one other thing I just remembered that freaked me out as a kid on the real world stuff was Rescue 911. There was an episode where kids were playing with an axe in their backyard and one of the kids chopped his fingers off. And I was like, oh, and they showed like the actual, like a picture of his, before the surgery, or I don't know how they got that, but that messed me up too. Like, that was in my brain forever.
I could never take that show seriously because of Shatner. Due to my age and everything, and like I think he's moved past it now since he did like Boston Legal and all these other things. But to me, he was still Captain Kirk. And I'm just like, why are you Captain Kirk doing this? Did they not pay you enough money as Captain Kirk? Now, Robert Stack, that was a scary mofo. Like, Unsolved Mysteries was a terrifying show. Rescue 911 is like, oh, I'm stuck in a well. Oh, I'm choking on some candy. Oh.
Well, this show that we're talking about, this episode is a spin-off from one of the most popular syndicated TV series ever broadcast. But we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but I want to hear again, like, what TV show spin-off really stood out to you most in your early days of TV watching? Something where you're just like, hey, wait, this came from this.
I'm gonna cheat, and there's like two examples for me. The first one would be Star Trek: The Next Generation, because I don't like the original series. I was at the right age. I remember when The Next Generation launched, and that kind of started my like Saturday viewing of syndicated shows, which carried over to what we're gonna talk about today. So it's like definitely Star Trek: The Next Generation. Like that made me a Trekker or whatever. But the real answer is Three's a Crowd. Now, we've always talked about, like, I love Three's Company. Yes, I love Three's Company, but I love the Three's Company universe, which also encompasses The Ropers and Three's a Crowd. They are not part of the same syndication package. So, Three's a Crowd would air in really weird times, like 2:30 in the morning. Like you would have to get through MASH and like 4 infomercials before it would come on. But we didn't get TV Guide. We got TV Week, which came with the Washington Post. And I would always check like Sundays, like what's coming on this week? Because we didn't have the on-screen guide or whatever. And if I saw like Threes like in the tiny little thing at 2:30 in the morning, like, guess who's staying up tonight, And like, it's a 13 episode series, Like, it can't last in syndication that long, but it's so elusive. Like, everybody knows Three's Company. Some people know the Ropers. Very few people know Three's a Crowd. And it's like, almost no one from that show acted again, except for like Robert Mandan and John Ritter. But like the girlfriend didn't really act again. The surfer dude didn't really act again. And it's such a really like interesting microcosm because it continues the Three's Company story. It's not like, oh, he moved to Chicago to restart his life or something. He still has the bistro. Even in 13 episodes, they managed to get Larry back in there for an appearance. So like, Three's a Crowd was the spin-off to me. And I just finally bought it from some bootlegger like during COVID. So now I can have Three's a Crowd whenever I want.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. It was weird for me because like I got into Beverly Hills 90210 in elementary school because I wanted to have something to talk about with girls that I liked, not knowing that puts you in the friend zone. I think I may have mentioned that in the past. But I remember because of that when The Heights premiered on Fox, and it starred this jerk musician boyfriend of Donna. But that's the problem. It wasn't until researching for this show that I realized he's not playing the same character. I had no idea. Watching it at the time, I thought it was the same character, just like Melrose Place. You had Jake was dating Kelly, right, on 90210, and then he goes and does Melrose Place. So like, I thought they were doing the same thing. So that doesn't count. That was going to be my choice, but it doesn't count. So I'm probably going to have to go with Masked Rider debuting in that 2-part episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers because I was all in on Power Rangers. Look, his show was stupid and not as cool as his 2-parter on Power Rangers, but I discovered TJ Roberts through this, and he is my favorite bad actor in my favorite so bad it's good movie, Tiger Heart. So I forgive Saban for dropping the ball on that one, and I'm just happy that I know about Tiger Heart because of that. So most people, I don't even know that Masked Rider was like a blip on their radar even during that era. It was promoted. It had a few tie-in merchandise items that had the toy line, which I bought, but other than that, people were just like, I don't know what that was. There was Power Rangers and VR Troopers, and I don't remember remember anything else, you know?
A lot of that comes down to where it was placed because people don't realize that A Friend in Need, that is the two-parter, Fox aired that as the season premiere for season 3. But right after it is Ninja Quest, which retcons the movie. So most people think that season 3 starts with them losing their powers, when no, really, it's the Masked Rider crossover.
That's wild. Yeah, I didn't realize that part either. Well, here's the thing though, Will. You know, all that stuff was going on in the 90s, Power Rangers and Masked Rider, but so was this other phenomenon. And we have to find out why a spinoff from that series they believed would be a hit. So let's find out with the green light.
Baywatch began as a primetime action-adventure series focused on the heroism and personal lives of California lifeguards, starring David Hasselhoff as Mitch Buchanan. The original version of the series was broadcast on NBC for one season from fall 1989 to spring 1990 before being canceled due to high production costs. Hasselhoff still wanted to hit the beach, so he redeveloped the series for syndication in 1991 with a new team of producers, and Baywatch became an instant hit, running worldwide for 11 seasons. Baywatch was known for its beautiful cast members and launched the careers of sex symbols like Pamela Anderson, Carmen Electra, Yasmine Bleeth, and Gina Lee Nolan, among others who wore the iconic red swimsuit. The show also welcomed established syndicated TV actors like Nicole Eggert and future movie stars like Jason Momoa. The signature sexy slow motion run of the series was parodied in dozens of TV shows and movies throughout the 90s and is a major pop culture touchstone of the decade. According to some reports, the viewing audience was 65% female, which goes against the general belief that Baywatch's popularity came only from lonely heterosexual men that were tuning in for some jiggle TV. Adam, were you amongst the legions of fans watching Baywatch each week?
Look, I was going through puberty, you know, when this is happening. I'm right on the cusp there, but I still needed more than just sexy babes to keep me watching a TV show. Like, for example, at the same time of Baywatch, you know, I had a crush on Nikki Cox, but Unhappily Ever After was actually funny and edgy, so I kept watching. We've talked about that in the past. In fact, I remember seeing a rerun of an earlier season of Baywatch where it was like 12-year-old Nikki Cox is on an episode, and I was very surprised. I was like, huh, she acted before Unhappily? She didn't just appear out of nowhere? But I just found the writing so bad. Like, even as a 13-year-old, it was goofy and not in a fun way. So Baywatch never has gotten more than an hour of my TV watching time in all of my life. Like, that's cumulative. I've tried to watch a few episodes in the last few years because I know, like, they remastered it. They've put it on some streaming platforms, and I can't get more than like 5-10 minutes in. Like, it just never works for me. So the only one I vaguely remember, there was some episode, Mitch was like dating a woman with a split personality, or she had an evil twin that wanted to kill her. There was something like that. That's like as much as I could retain from that series. So Baywatch has just never had anything for me. But what about for you?
Oh God, yeah. I loved every second of it. Now, I will admit, I don't remember the NBC season. And it's crazy because, I mean, I was watching Amen and 227 and everything in that era. Don't even remember it existed. But syndicated Baywatch, I was there all 11 years. I loved that show because you can turn your brain off, you know? Like, I mean, this is a show that really made the audience believe that lifeguarding was a career and not something for white suburban teenagers to do in the summer. Like, that blew my mind. Like, Mitch Buchanan can pay a mortgage as a lifeguard, you know? So I was like, I loved it. A dip into my psyche. So I used to do estate sales with my mom. Like, we would go to these things like every weekend. And at some point, and I'm in high school, but we went to this house where the guy had like a ton of Playboys. And I was just kind of like, oh, these are collector's items. And my mom just kind of like rolled her eyes and was like, whatever. So I got to get these things, right? Well, so a lot of people don't realize that from the middle of the show towards the end, Playboy and Baywatch formed some sort of relationship. it was almost like sports. You could look at the Playboy and be like, hey, that's when she was in the farm team, because then she'd end up in the red swimsuit. And you're like, hey, I remember her when she had that rose in that place, but it's like, the thing with it was it actually kind of gets too big. Around season 8, they have hired them. Like, you might see them walk by on their way to like one of the patented yellow Jeeps, and they might say something to Mitch, but they were top heavy. No pun intended. So but I was completely into the world of Baywatch. I know the continuity. So when I heard about like what we're going to talk about today, I was all for it.
That is wild to me. Yeah, I can't imagine what is there for lore, because like it is the same thing. Like, I knew Pamela Anderson was on Baywatch, but I never watched her there. Like, my friend had a subscription to Playboy because his mom says like, I'd rather, he's doing this in his room than he's getting some girl pregnant. That was her philosophy, she told us. And I was like, okay.
That was my mom's philosophy, really. Yeah. So I was like, I get it, but to be perfectly honest with you, because I understand like there's no substance. It is all style and all that. But the reason I started was this was an era where I would have followed David Hasselhoff into hell. I think it comes up fairly often on this show, but just in my everyday life, I don't emphasize how much Knight Rider meant to me. Its peak was around the time my dad died, but it was also like around when I started kindergarten, and that's kind of what you're like bonding with classmates over. And like, I loved Knight Rider. I still have, it's not a Power Wheels because it's by Coleco, but I still have the pedal car in my mom's shed. I have 2 big wheels, one of which was acquired within the last decade. Like, I will scoop up anything Knight Rider. Also, because we forget, between the failure of NBC Baywatch and the success of syndicated Baywatch was Knight Rider 2000. That was like the bridge to keep me on the like Hasselhoff train. It's like, oh, well, that didn't work out for you. Let's see what you're doing over here at the beach.
Yeah, because most people were there for the ladies, it seems. Even according to that survey, because it said that 65% female audience, because it was strong, independent women characters being written on the show, and they were relating on somehow. But here's the thing, Will. The casting of a show with sexy stars, that's one way to find an audience. But another tried and true format was just having a weekly detective show, Mystery of the Week, right? Honestly, that trend started before TV. Sherlock Holmes and pulp crime novels of the 30s, Radio, The Shadow, one of my favorites, right? But the 80s in particular saw an explosion of just popular private investigators like Magnum P.I., Simon and Simon, Moonlighting, Hardcastle and McCormick, Remington Steele. It keeps going. Jake and the Fat Man, Heart to Heart. Even Mr. T got into the game post A-Team. He had a series called TNT. And yeah, Michael Knight, obviously, Knight Rider, 4 seasons, but it's only natural then that he would eventually want to return to the genre that made him a household name, thinking Baywatch is big, how do we spin it off? But also hugely popular at this time, and eventually in his line of thinking on network TV, there is the spooky, conspiracy-filled Fox drama, The X-Files, and that show earned 62 Emmy nominations and 16 awards over its various incarnations. And apparently those stories of alien abductions and genetic mutants and monsters of folklore inspired a lot of imitators and even spawned sister shows, right, for the X-Files itself. So, Will, I am curious, you say you didn't like spooky things. What was your experience with the X-Files phenomenon, loving Fox the way you do? And did you enjoy in any way the spooky trend that started creeping into the 90s?
I was not an X-Files person. I know it was the new hotness around like 94, and it was so scary, and like friends would talk about it, and that just drove me in the other direction. Like, I eventually came around, but I only came around the time of the first movie. And somebody's gonna correct me here. I want to say it's season 4, but like in the finale, somebody sets fire to the X-Files, and this is pre-internet, so you're like, oh no, paper! Those were the files! They're not in the cloud! They burn up the X-Files, and it's like, oh, like, do we start over? Do we like just go back to normal wings of the FBI? So that's what got me interested, because honestly, I hate all of the Monster of the Week episodes of the X-Files. I only got on board for the conspiracy. I love a good conspiracy because I'm one of those people where things might sound crazy, but there's more that we don't know than that we do. And I tell a lot of people this, I've reached an age where I'm willing to believe everything and nothing at all. So like, I think this shaped it. When we learn about like cigarette smoking man and how he had like a hand in everything, those were parts of the X-Files, and those get more intense as it gets near its original ending because it's been revived so many times. But I did enjoy the trend because while X-Files was like the big kid on network, there was a lot of memorable stuff in syndication. Like The Outer Limits was rebooted in 95. I was a weekly viewer of that. It was always packaged with Stargate SG-1, which I am a huge fan of that franchise and have no one to talk about it with because that's like a dead fandom basically. And the weird thing with those was they were on Showtime, but they were simulcast in syndication. But because they were on Showtime, if you buy the DVDs, there's just random boobs because they had to justify them being on Showtime. So like I was into that. I was into Poltergeist The Legacy. This is a show that I've put on the list that I hope we get to talk about one day because it has almost nothing to do with the movies, but it's a really interesting structure of like, it's almost like Harry Potter before Harry Potter. There are all these like legacy houses that have to deal with the paranormal and everybody has like a role in the team. I was big into that, and that would come on after Baywatch Nights. So I liked low budget, not really swinging for the fences sci-fi, but I was not an X-Files guy. What about you?
Yeah, like I've probably seen 5 episodes total of the X-Files.
Oh, wow.
It was too low energy for me. It never grabbed my attention. Like I remember the one where the guy had his brother growing on the side of his body, like they were like in some traveling carnival or something. But like what's funny is I was actually a bigger fan of the short-lived spin-off, The Lone Gunman, because I loved that group of nerds on the few episodes that I watched. So when I saw the promo that said they had their own show, I started watching that. And so I got excited, but then it went away pretty quickly. So I was like, oh man. But also Millennium, right? Which was basically the X-Files without the sexual tension of Mulder and Scully. It's Lance Henriksen as a solo investigator. Same creator though, you know, Chris Carter behind it, right? Mainly I watched Millennium though, or started watching it because the members of KISS all had cameos out of makeup on the Halloween 1998 episode. And so Paul Stanley gets killed in the opening scene and all that kind of stuff. So I checked in here and there because of that connection. But one of the shows that I remember standing out to me is like, oh, this is creepy stuff, was a show called American Gothic that was on CBS. And that was very much about like the spooky goings on in a small southern town. It starred a young Lucas Black, who I eventually loved in Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. But that show, it was really intense and a super dark tone. It was no fun at all. So I only watched like 2 episodes because my friend had taped it and he wanted me to give it a shot. He's like, you gotta see the show. I'm like, no, like I don't want any more of this. This is too disturbing because it wasn't like supernatural hijinks. It was just like there's people getting assaulted and killed and all sorts of stuff. You're like, this is not good.
Right. You know, X-Files kind of had like a Watchmen effect in that like it influenced the genre. And while I didn't love X-Files in the beginning, I loved the effect it was having elsewhere. And you can still see shows that exist because of what they did. You know, like you're talking about the kind of like not a fun show, makes you kind of uncomfortable. There was like a limited series called Wayward Pines, which was just, ooh. All I'm going to say is the name. You look it up, you find it, it's worth your time.
Well, it sounds like, you know, for some people traveling to some of these shows, they were going down to the bottom floor to hell. So, well, we got to find out what this show is all about with our elevator pitch.
Well, Baywatch Nights premiered in syndication during the fall 1995 season and starred David Hasselhoff as his character Mitch Buchanan from Baywatch, who joined the private detective firm of former police officer Garner Ellerby, played by Greg Allen Williams, who was also a series regular on Baywatch for many seasons. The pair were joined by a young female detective named Ryan McBride, played by Angie Harmon. The private investigation office was located above a beachside nightclub owned by Lou Raymond, played by Lou Rawls, who also sang the bluesy series theme song. Halfway through the first season, the show added an attractive blonde named Donna, played by Donna D'Erico, and a sexy young photographer named Griff, played by Eddie Cibrian. Baywatch Nights in this incarnation was a standard case of the week style series with a lighthearted sense of humor. Many stories started with kidnappings, murders, drug dealers, and sometimes roller skating burglars. Other episodes of note involved the team going undercover as phone sex operators, drag performers, or gigolos. The first season was not a ratings hit out of the gate, so they tried to bring over viewers with Baywatch cast member cameos, like Yasmin Bleeth and Billy Warlock. But even these pretty faces didn't get more folks to tune into Baywatch Nights. So going into the second season, the show was retooled even further. Adam, were you aware of this spinoff when it premiered in 1995?
Well, like I said, I wasn't watching Baywatch, but I couldn't help but stumble upon it and this show while flipping channels on a lazy Saturday afternoon, right? It's just like, oh. So, like, I remember seeing Baywatch Nights, mainly the opening credits, because I don't think I ever stuck around after that to, like, even find out what the show was about. So it's one of those things where I had always heard about it, and I remembered, certain things that made it infamous, but at the time I was just like, oh, this is interesting, but I have no interest. Like, it's interesting, but not for me, I guess. One thing I did want to mention too, because I didn't include this in our recap, but the show also had one more character named Destiny, played by Lisa Stahl, who's like in it for like 3 or 4 episodes, and then she's gone. So I just thought we at least have to give her due that she was in the opening credits at the beginning and then disappears. But what about for you? Like, were you immediately going from Baywatch to Baywatch Nights?
Yeah, but I like that you mentioned like you usually change after the theme song, because there's a certain time period where like you see the opening credits and you're like, is this Baywatch Nights or is this Nightman? Because like there's a lot of overlap thematically. But yeah, no, I was there for it. It's Hasselhoff. From what we had seen, it's supposed to be like sexy at night. People think the beach shuts down when the sun goes down, but it's just getting started. That kind of mentality. I'm probably like speaking out of class here. It's a show I've never actually watched, but through pop culture, I feel like I know what it was. It was like Baywatch was doing Silk Stalkings.
That was my thought too. And again, a show I've never seen more than a few minutes of flipping channels back in the day. But yeah, that's the vibe. Now, season 2 of Baywatch Nights took on a spookier tone as Mitch, Ryan, Griff, and Donna were now being pulled into supernatural investigations. Gone was Ellerby, but arriving on the scene were mythological demons, sea monsters, voodoo cults, mummies, frozen Viking warriors, and possible vampires? The series even took a dive into science fiction, with Mitch and Ryan being transported to alternate realities, traveling back in time. But despite trying to ride the coattails of the X-Files, Baywatch Nights was canceled after season 2. Will, was this change in the theme enough to keep you tuning in to the midnight adventures of Mitch Buchanan?
No, I was still watching it, but I wasn't paying attention to it. If we were a Nielsen family, they would have gotten the ratings, but like I didn't care at this point because it was doing too much. Like at this point in my life, I used to listen to music on my Sony Discman while watching TV with the closed captioning on. So like if I really didn't care about you, you're getting the closed captioning and I'll read it when I look up, but like I'm not really engaged. So season 1, I was engaged. Season 2, I'm listening to Paint the Sky with Stars Stars by Enya while reading the dialogue along the screen. I did not like the thematic chain.
Wow. I definitely, again, remember the theme song changing and the opening credits now having a skull and a taxidermied animal head and all this stuff. And I was like, is this Forever Night or is this Baywatch Nights? Like, another syndicated show that I never watched was Forever Night, but it was always on. I was always flipping channels. Oh, here's Forever Night again. So I just assumed that David Hasselhoff was now saying, oh, we're going to fight vampires every week. That's what I thought Baywatch Nights was. And I was like, pass, like not interested. Again, there's one more cast member that I did not include. There's a guy who is basically like the paranormal expert. He's exposition man, right? That they go to, Dorian Gregory, who's got like a great voice, but he always just shows up to tell Mitch everything he needs to know.
And he's got a great 90s era Marvel name, Diamant Teague.
So yeah, when people think Baywatch Nights, they think of season 2. They remember this version. And so that's why I think it's going to be so fascinating to get into this conversation for people really like myself who had not watched it until the preparations for this episode. So we will see where that takes us in our cheers. So, Will, you said you did like season 1, and I have to ask, was the theme song a part of that? Because for me, it is awesome. It's early 90s adult contemporary blues rock. It feels like it should have been on the soundtrack of a Roadhouse sequel starring Brian Bosworth. It gets me in a mood, but what about you?
Not so much, because you gotta remember, this is the era of Germans love David Hasselhoff. So, like, he already had a lot of great songs that existed if you knew how to find them, and this was not one of them. So, like, it didn't do it for me. And Lou Rawls is just kind of like, I guess he's a Hall of Famer, but he just doesn't have any memorable games. It was a big get, I feel, for them, but I just don't love that theme song.
I do want to say, I like that they really chose to do something new and interesting in that they really hooked in to the blues club theme. There were a lot of situations, at least in the early episodes, where they'd have like montages or certain action that it was silent except for a blues guitar or a saxophonist, and they would cut interspersed, like in the action that was happening, somebody getting beaten with a pipe. There'd be a guy on a fire escape playing the saxophone with really moody lighting. It was just really artistic. Like they really made a choice, and I thought that was very fun. Speaking of fun, I will say that I did like that the series, even though it was dealing with some heavy topics sometimes, it still didn't take itself too seriously in that first season. Like the characters take time to joke around with each other, make fun of each other. They're not afraid to look foolish sometimes. Like there's one episode in particular I'm thinking of where Mitch and Ellerby, they're doing surveillance and they're in a convertible that's just parked in a field, and they got their fried chicken box, and they're they've been on stakeout for however long, and they got their binoculars, and a crop dusting plane flies over the top and dumps its payload onto the whole deal. So they were covered head to toe in like white powder. They said, oh, I hate this job, or whatever, I hate surveillance, whatever the line is. And I assume it's pesticide, so it seems like they should be taking it a little bit more seriously if they're covered in some sort of poison. But perfect throwaway syndicated TV moments,
Yeah, and I mean, this shouldn't surprise anyone, but my cheer goes to Hasselhoff. If you really look at it, this is a point in his career where he's using David Duchovny as a roadmap. And season 1 of Baywatch Nights is like sanitized Red Shoe Diaries. But then, like, season 2 is We've Got the X-Files at Home. He's doing his best. He's using these foreign investors to give him his own Duchovny vehicles. He does the best with what he's got. But there's some points, I almost feel like we needed to split this in half of, like, what was the best of season 1 and what was the best of season 2. Because in season 2, there is an episode, I will say it is my favorite episode because it ties into a very important moment on Baywatch. But in season 2, Mitch gets possessed by a demon, and he does some of the best acting of Hasselhoff's life. Like, he really had fun with that. Like, he does some force chokes, he does some like maniacal laughing, like he gets hit by a semi truck. And the only thing that snaps him out of it is the ghost of Stephanie Holden. Stephanie Holden is a lifeguard from Baywatch proper. She's one of the OGs, but around like season 6, they kill her off. But they kill her off in like the worst way. She finds out she has cancer, and this is when she's training for the Olympics. And then, like, she beats the cancer. So to celebrate, she and her fiance and Mitch and this class of children go out on a sailboat. And they get caught in a squall, and a mast falls on her and crushes her to death. It was always a weird situation because she was trying to move on, and she had this fiance. But for 6 years, she and Mitch have this, like, will they, won't they? So they never get to. So, like, her ghost comes back in Baywatch Nights a year later to tell him it's not his time yet. And I'm like, continuity. That's the quickest way to my heart. But just Hasselhoff's acting was incredible.
Wow. Okay. See, my MVP of the series is Angie Harmon because apparently this was her first major acting role.
Yep.
Hasselhoff met her on a plane and then invited her to like come audition for the show. Like she's just got a very unique voice just to start. It's kind of low, little scratchy. She's got this slight southern drawl. She's from Texas, but she really conveys like this tough, capable, but very likable character. Like, plus her line deliveries, they're so natural and like they're all her own. Like, I've never heard anybody talk like her on TV. Like, for example, like the phone sex operator episode, like she's nervous about going undercover and she's practicing in front of the mirror and she just has some hilarious bits that she's doing, but she's also like so much better than the other female lead they bring on, Donna D'Errico. So I'm glad they kept Ryan as the co-lead of the show for both seasons. Like, she didn't disappear. Like, every episode, I'm just like, let's get to the Ryan scenes. I don't need Hasselhoff right now, you know?
I agree with that. I love Angie Harmon. Like, that made me, like, I had the biggest crush on her from this show. So, like, when she went on to, like, Law & Order and Rizzoli and Isles and all that, it's like, she's always Angie Harmon. She doesn't have, like, a ton of range, really. She's always, like, Lady Cop. But, like, I loved her in this show. I think the thing I like about her, and you don't see a lot of it unless she's like really around Donna D'Errico, I like her the same reason I grew to like Alexandra Paul, who was Stephanie Holden. They are both these like normal women set in this like unrealistic world of plastic women. You know what I mean? It's like Alexandra Paul was always a joke when like I was back in school because like she is here why? She was like an inverted A cup. Like she was brunette. She had that like Connie Selica short hair. Like it was like she was not the sex symbol. But because she was different amongst all these sex symbols, like there's something interesting about that girl. And it was the same with Angie Harmon here. Like she brought non-beach to the beach. And that's what I liked because that's how they set up her character. She's from the big city. I think they say she's from New York, which doesn't really mesh with how she comes across on screen. But like she came here for a different change of pace in the laid back beach lifestyle to start over, that kind of thing.
Hey there, TV lovers. Adam taking a break here to tell you about our sponsor for this episode, HalloweenCostumes.com. Now, for the best Halloween costume ideas for this year's festivities, HalloweenCostumes.com is the place. Whether you are searching for a costume for a Halloween night or need the perfect outfit to wear to your upcoming murder mystery party. Remember that episode of Saved by the Bell? Their costume selection is larger than any other Halloween store in the industry. It's their mission to provide an unmatched experience when you are shopping for Halloween costumes, accessories, decor, and costume apparel. They carry high-quality costumes and accessories such as wigs, hats, masks, and costume boots, sure to provide costume ideas for everyone, and all at a price that'll fit even the tightest of budgets. The perfect Halloween costume is only a couple clicks away at HalloweenCostumes.com. And while you're browsing the selection of Halloween costumes for kids or baby costumes, don't forget to treat yourself to a little Halloween fun. HalloweenCostumes.com has a large selection of adult costumes, sexy costumes, and even pet costumes. You might even want to take a look at their couples costumes ideas or a group Halloween costume for a larger crew. Many of their styles are exclusive, and we are confident that you will find something you like in their costume store. Even though they carry cheap Halloween costumes, that doesn't mean that the quality suffers. HalloweenCostumes.com prides themselves on superiority and believe their customers deserve the best costume experience at a reasonable price. So you could go on over to geekstermedia.com and click the link there. You'll automatically get 20% off, or check the link in our show notes. But enjoy your browsing at HalloweenCostumes.com. And now back to the show. Now, you mentioned second season, you had a favorite episode. I have a favorite episode too, because I do agree. The second season is more visually interesting, is what I say, than the first. It has a lot of things going on each episode, but specifically, a lot of crazy camera angles, a lot of production design on the sets. They're dark. They got cobwebs and fog. They took really wild swings for the plots. Even if they're not always executed amazingly, it's just a fun setup. And my favorite that I couldn't believe this is happening was these two frozen Vikings are found in a block of ice and unthawed in the modern day. And the first one is played by Sven-Ole Thorsen, who, if you don't know, he's Arnold Schwarzenegger's stuntman and buddy. And he shows up in a lot of movies, but he just wanders the modern world. He's wearing his animal skins. He's got a helmet. He's got a really bad wig, and he's just looking confused. He's got his giant sword. He's swinging it at semi-trucks that drive past him. He's looking longingly at giant boats in a shipyard. He's like, what is this? Where am I? And then the second Viking wakes up, and he's played by another stunt guy named Nils Allen Stewart, who I know he was in The Mask and The Shadow in 1994. But anyway, they fight each other with swords. They fight Mitch. There's very little dialogue in the episode, and that is to its advantage.
But who has the most dialogue? A very special appearance.
That's right. We have Devin from Knight Rider. This is a reunion episode. This was his final TV appearance, was Baywatch Nights.
As it should have been. Yeah, you sent that to me. You're like, if you only watch one episode, watch this one. So angry at you. And at that show, we'll get into it in jeers.
Well then, Will, let's get into them. It's time for our jeers.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
So I have to ask this to you, Will. If there is a difference between Michael Knight and Mitch Buchanan, that decade of being on TV, because unlike you, Hasselhoff is my main complaint about the show. He is my jeer. I feel when he was a cool, young, cocky rogue out for justice, and he had a robot car that did a lot of the work for him, he was great, but now he's a middle-aged guy who acts like he's still in his 20s, and, he's carousing with women, and the opening credits to season 1 in particular also have him running a lot and jumping and stuff. And he looks like he's straining now with the physical stuff in the mid-90s. He only knows how to run on sand and make it look good.
I was going to say that same thing.
Yeah.
He was chasing the photographer, and it's why can't you catch him? Can you only run on sand?
But more than that, even, it's just Mitch is presented as the hottest and most capable man on the planet. And I don't feel that Hasselhoff has the look or the charisma to pull it off. But you're coming at it loving him. So do you see a big difference in Baywatch Hasselhoff versus Knight Rider Hasselhoff?
Yes. But here's where the difference between seasons comes in for me. Season 1 is Knight Rider. There's just no car. It's like those Garfield without Garfield comics. This is Knight Rider without Kit. If you watch the pilot, his whole interaction with Carol Alt, they're really redoing Knight Rider. It's instead of him riding into a new town, the women come to him, he falls for them. He really shouldn't because they're a client. Instead of Bonnie, it's now Angie Harmon is saying, you can't get involved with a client. There's no Devin to keep him in check. But that's what they were doing. And at some point, I guess they were like, this doesn't work without the car. So then we get season 2 with all the X-Files stuff. Because one thing I noticed, season 2 reveals that there is an angle you should never shoot Hasselhoff. In that same episode I'm talking about where he's hit by the truck, they're performing CPR on him. And when he comes to on the ground, it's this undershot. And I'm just like, wow, you are not a handsome man. Like the age was starting to show, and he's even wearing like a black turtleneck and black slacks because of course that's what a demon would wear. But like black is supposed to be slimming and it's not working. And it's like, I don't know what happened. Like, did they film it in the winter? Because Hasselhoff was pretty much in shape for the run of Baywatch proper, and this is in the final third of that show, so I don't get why he was so dad bod here.
Yeah, he looks great in just red shorts, and then you put him in like this windbreaker or whatever, and he looks like an old dude. And it's so strange. But I also have a question too, and I'm sure this was happening on Baywatch as well. But how does being a great lifeguard qualify you to be a private investigator? Because Mitch's backstory is that he's a Navy SEAL, but that's not law enforcement. And yet everybody treats him like the world's greatest cop.
Well, I was talking to my friend Mike about this on the way to RetroCon, actually, because if you watch that NBC season, there is much more of a like almost military structure to Baywatch. There are officers, like he's Lieutenant Mitch Buchanan, and he has superiors, which are these like old guys who are like the cream of the crop after like World War II or something. Like it's very strange. So they do like to weave in that he holds some kind of rank with someone who cares. But that was my thing here, where he's not even a partner in this detective agency. He's just cosplaying a PI. Like Garner and Angie Harmon are partners in this detective agency. And then when Garner disappears, they don't even explain it like, oh, he went to go take care of his mom back east or something. Who's paying his half of the bill? Because Mitch is still hanging around doing the PI thing, but he's not licensed.
Nope.
Like in the credits, they show him like brandishing guns, and I'm like, does he even have a license for that gun? Like they really fudge some stuff, and I have a big problem with that throughout both seasons because in the pilot, he drives up in this like amazing car. I don't know sports cars, so I'm not even going to try to name it, but it was way out of his tax bracket, and they never talk about like, oh, this is a loaner because mine's in the shop or anything like that. We're supposed to believe he is the coolest guy on the beach, like you said. Like this is his kit now, because we see that car again. It's just his red sports car. But there have been plots on Baywatch about how Mitch is making no money. So like we can't even pretend he's like independently wealthy. But then I'm like, are we overthinking it, or are they trying to tell us something? Because I actually did research on this. I was like, how much would an LA County lifeguard make in 1996? And I could find nothing. The current rate, like in Santa Monica, is like $20 an hour. But here's where it gets interesting. In LA County, they have an interesting union clause going on, as well as a lot of like overtime, where in 2021, there were 30 LA County lifeguards who made more than $500,000. So was this loophole always there? Like, is this just LA's secret? So maybe that's where Mitch gets his funding.
It's strange. And like you say, like all the women that he's like carousing with are all like super rich and successful. Like, is he a gigolo? Like, what is going on? People have seen him running along the beach in his shorts for how long? Like, that's how people know him. And now everybody comes to him. My daughter was kidnapped. Like, it's so strange to be like, you can stop a serial killer, Mitch. You gotta help me. And like you say, he's not a partner. He's not licensed. He's just there because he knows everybody. He's the one who brings in the clientele. But why do they think the lifeguard is the person to solve their problems? Like, that is the crazy thing.
Supermodel Carol Alt, like she's there filming a shoot for like a calendar or something, and she's immediately taken by Mitch. And it's like, no, a woman like that would be like, so what do you do? It's like, well, I'm a lifeguard. She's like, so what are you going to do when you graduate high school? Like, how does a man like that get a woman like her just from class differences? You're right. Like, you really have to suspend disbelief, and that is troublesome. Another jeer I have, they do this twice. There's no explanation for either setting in the sense that there's no official pilot for Baywatch Nights. There is what I would call, it's not even a sizzle reel. Hasselhoff clearly recorded this when they went to that like international summit to sell shows into syndication, because before the pilot starts, you see him on the beach dressed in his Baywatch uniform talking about, he says what we said before. It's like, most people think that the fun at the beach is just during the day, but when the sun goes down, things are just getting started. He's setting up what you're about to see, but it would have been much more interesting to see Ryan arrive at the beach and maybe clash heads, because they never have the relationship you expect them to have. Like, I expect them to kind of butt heads, but also my biggest issue is there's no chemistry amongst any of this cast, which is interesting considering Hasselhoff and Greg Allen Williams were on Baywatch proper together, and I felt they had a good relationship, but that didn't carry over to this show. And as a trio, it doesn't work. So I understand why Greg Allen Williams leaves. I don't like that he never returns to Baywatch until like the last season. Like, it's not like, oh, he pops back up like, didn't work out for me, or Mitch bought me out. Like, he just disappears, you know? And then when it becomes paranormal, there's never a mission change. There's never an occupational pivot. They're not like, oh, these are the cases we're going after now. It's just all of a sudden, every case they take on is some wacky supernatural crap, and they just go with it. They don't ever stop to think like, is it something in the air? Because these past 22 weeks have really been weird. You know, like, that would have been interesting to me. And on top of the lack of chemistry, there aren't really character arc. If anything, they put buttons on Baywatch, like Billy Warlock comes back, Stephanie Holding comes back, but there's a very important part in the season premiere of season 2, because you already know there's friction between Diamant Teague and Mitch Buchanan, but you don't know why. Teague is coming up to the beach. Donna is smitten with him because, like, he's a handsome biracial guy who reads books. But, like, other than that, Mitch just has this look on his face, like, it's that guy again. So, like, they clearly have history. It's never explored. When Teague tries to explain, like, oh, there's some weird stuff going on around this beach at night, Mitch, he says, I don't believe in the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy. So they're setting him up. He is the skeptic. At no point, even after being possessed by a demon, hit by a semi, and meeting his ex-girlfriend's ghost, does he ever start to believe. It's the Scully issue. Like, it took forever for Scully to be like, I guess there's something to this. I mean, the aliens cured my cancer and I had an immaculate birth and all. You know, it's like the same thing here, but they never touch on it. There's so much opportunity that's just squandered.
I agree for sure, because, like, yeah, it's just like the supporting characters also are weak. It's like you hope that there's somebody that's going to pop. And like I say, Angie Harmon is the only one that interests me. But like Eddie Cibrian as Griff, I don't know what his deal is. He just shows up. He's usually like hitting on a girl. And then Mitch is like, come on, Griff, we're going to go on a mission. And then he's got a camera with him a lot of times. So he's Jimmy Olsen. He's running around taking pictures. And then Donna D'Errico she buys the nightclub from Lou Rawls, and then she's around sometimes. My only connection to Donna D'Errico, because I know she goes on to be on Baywatch after this series, but Mark Hamill's comic book, The Movie, it is a mockumentary that most people don't know about. He got all his voice actor buddies to be in front of the camera, and they improv'd a film about a superhero comic book being adapted to a big screen film that was changing the source material and all this stuff. But Donna D'Errico plays a booth babe at San Diego Comic-Con, so she's doing like attractive girl comedy where it's supposed to be funny that a beautiful woman would do silly voices and play along with juvenile jokes. That's what I knew her from. And so, like, even Dorian Gregory as his character, like he's one note, because this was his first acting job too, and all he does is pretty much just like yell at Mitch all the time. He's like, you need to understand this. you don't believe this, but this is the thing. And you're like, oh, it just gets really, really boring really fast. Plus, because I love Angie Harmon, they kind of waste her a lot in season 2. She becomes the woman in the chair. Like Mitch goes on the adventure with Griff or whoever, but she's always like on a headset or on a laptop and she's giving expositional dialogue or instructions. You got to go this way, Mitch, go this way. She's like way overpowered for her knowledge base now. In the episode where they get blasted by a ray or a ray opens up a portal that they go through and they're in this new world, she's like, I think we're in a parallel dimension. And you're like, what? How did you jump to that conclusion? In 5 minutes of being in this new place, how did you determine that was what the story is? So it's just like, it starts getting so messy, even though like it's fun that they're making those choices, but they don't really build on what they could have done with the characters.
And there's so many questions. I mean, there's an episode, which I think this is the first one of the supernatural stuff, where there's like a South American water demon thing. It sank a ship. So like he and Griff go down to explore it. And like you said, Ryan's the woman in the chair and she just happens to have schematics of the ship that they're exploring, that kind of thing. But I'm like, you have no jurisdiction here. Like, you are interfering in a crime scene. You haven't been deputized by anyone. This isn't even a paying job. This is just that some like Malaysian girl washed up on the beach screaming, and they're like, well, looks like a job for LA's best lifeguard.
Yeah. It really is so strange that they didn't like have him brought in by a government agency connected to his Navy SEAL position at some point. Like, we need you, Mitch. You're the one who knows these waters the best. There's a lot of creepy stuff going on around here. Yeah.
You know what I was thinking about, though? That's sort of insane. That this spinoff didn't happen like at the beginning of Baywatch. It didn't happen in the waning Hawaii days of Baywatch. This show launched when Baywatch was the #1 show in the world. So how bad were these ratings that this show couldn't limp for like 3 more seasons? Like, I don't purport to know what international audiences want, but I can only imagine that the Germans who love David Hasselhoff were watching this and like, but where are the boobins? You know, because that's what they wanted from Baywatch.
Speaking of which, so I found some interviews on YouTube from this era. There's one where Hasselhoff goes on Jay Leno when the show is first launching, so first season Baywatch Nights, and like they barely even get into it. He's just like, yeah, we're doing this detective kind of show. It should be a lot of fun. And then Jay Leno's like, you know, everybody's always saying Hasselhoff, big in Germany, big in Germany. We wanted to see if that was true. We sent our correspondent down to the German consulate, and this guy's walking around with a photo of David Hasselhoff asking everybody that works at this office, do you know this man? I can't identify him. No, you'll have to talk to this person. They might be able to identify him. And finally, like the ambassador from Germany's like, why are you here? No, I don't know this man. It's so funny. And Hasselhoff's like, not my audience, I guess. And then he goes on Conan for the second season for when it's supernatural. And that one is hilarious. We'll have to share that on social media. But the funniest part, he's like, yeah, well, ratings were bad. So when you do that, you change the show. Now we're doing Monster of the Week. Like, he just admits flat out, our ratings weren't good. We're totally doing a new show, basically. I loved that. Like, just the power. Because he's like, I got the #1 show in the world. I'm just trying this other thing over here. But because of that, like, I praised like the first season's interesting choices with the visuals of a blues musician playing or whatever. But then they also did a lot of cameos and they were kind of clunkily handled. For example, there's an episode where there's like this female impersonator group that's being attacked by a guy in a Richard Nixon mask. So there's like all these drag queens walking around, and randomly Skee-Lo is there performing I Wish. You know, I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a ball. He's just there on stage where there's like a Marilyn Monroe and a Judy Garland running around. And then they cut to a close-up of Skee-Lo rapping. And you're just like, these things do not go together. We had Skee-Lo for the day, and so we shoved him into the scene. And like Michael Winslow from Police Academy just pops up in an episode. He's a reformed criminal who can track cell phone signals, but he starts doing his beeps and boops for no reason. Like, it's not part of his process. He's just, remember me? I'm the guy who does the thing. They make weird choices for the sake of like, hey, aren't you excited to see this person? It's like, yeah, but why now?
Wouldn't it be sad if that's what's keeping this show off streaming? Is
Oh, yeah.
Skilo costs too much to license?
But I have to ask you, because this was my same complaint for The Fall Guy, a similar show that I really wasn't on board for. Did this show need to be an hour-long drama? Because I see in every episode how they are padding this thing. Sometimes they're using stock footage, or they're just dragging out a scene of someone being stalked or terrorized. They're just like flipping the camera, like just changing the direction they're running, but it's the same footage. Like the format of most detective series at the time, I understand it's an hour-long thing, but as we've talked about, they don't have the charisma in the cast to justify it, and the writing is definitely not there. So I was getting bored. I was scanning through a lot of episodes, just like, let me see where this next thing happens, because I can tell this is going to go on for 5 minutes longer than it needs to.
Yeah, Baywatch is kind of like when we talked about Gen 13 and your other podcast, Wizards, the podcast guide to comics, where it's an exciting property. Baywatch is colorful and boobly and jiggly and sunny, and this was none of that. This was the polar opposite of that, and it didn't provide a substitute. Like, it really did seem like, yeah, fun goes with the sun. The problem, though, is that's the format. Even if they couldn't fill it, you just can't do half-hour syndicated non-comedies. Even Baywatch, because you didn't watch it a lot, Baywatch was padded as hell because the slow motion running took up some time, but also this is another reason it's hard to get like pure episodes on DVD, and the streaming ones are like edited, where especially early Baywatch, there's like a music video segment. It doesn't really mesh with the plot at all, but like you might learn a new song from it. That's where I learned Duran Duran's Ordinary World, because there was an episode about the old guys who used to be the superiors coming back to the beach, and they're all dying off, just sitting on the beach looking out at the water. You know, like that took up time, but that was a staple of the show. They didn't do that here. This didn't translate to that. So like everything that made Baywatch was absent here, and they made the mistake of thinking David Hasselhoff was Baywatch.
Yeah.
Nothing could be further than the truth, especially in the last 2 seasons where he's not even there. You know?
Well, that's the truth, Will. So by the end of season 2 of Baywatch Nights, they definitely weren't breathing. They needed some CPR, and we got to get in there, see if we can bring them back to life as the show doctors. So here's the thing, Will. I had no hope for Shusha last episode, and you saved it. We found something that could work. But I actually believe in Baywatch Nights because they had already retooled the show once, and Monster of the Week wasn't working. So I say, why not try another genre like live-action fantasy adventure? That's right. We just add a K to the title, and we still have Baywatch Nights, but with a whole different vibe. Look, Xena and Hercules, Will. They already had the market cornered for fantasy adventure on land. So Baywatch Nights takes place underwater. Here's the pitch, all right? The first episode of season 3, Donna, while on a jet skiing date with a hunk, is taken hostage by an evil Atlantean named Mervyn, who is looking for a bride with which to breed a race of hybrid Atlanteans that can breathe on land and water, allowing him to conquer the entire world. After centuries of developing a DNA-modifying serum, it's finally perfected, and Mervyn is ready to raise his army. So what's happening? Well, Mitch is busy training a group of new young recruits when he gets a visit from Ryan, and she's there pulling up to the Baywatch speedboat, telling him about a distress call from Donna, and with no time to waste, they all follow the signal, and they find her abandoned watercraft, but right when they do, the boat is ambushed from the depths by Atlantean soldiers who bring them down, and after learning of Mervyn's plan while they're in an air pocket jail cell, Mitch, Ryan, and the recruits are all scheduled for execution, but a duo trio of Atlantean freedom fighters named Myrna and Murphy breaks them out. And while trying to rescue Donna and return to the surface, Mitch's recruits are all injected with the serum, which is administered by spines of mutated sea urchins, and they become human Atlantean hybrids. Realizing the threat to the surface world, those recruits agree to stay and fight with the rebels, while Mitch, Ryan, and Donna return to the surface world to protect their fellow land dwellers from the tyranny of Mervyn. They're working in tandem. Meanwhile, the recruits are each outfitted with their own unique Atlantean armor and sea animal companion, and dubbed the Baywatch Nights. Yes!
Oh, God.
Will, if this incarnation proves too costly, they could just make it a joint venture with Saban Entertainment and it'll air on Fox Kids Saturday mornings.
I would watch it. I mean, there's a lot of Stargate Atlantis in there, but I would watch it. Okay. That's much more fleshed out than I got. I have 3 potential ideas. None of them are long, but on the one hand, I would revert back to the season 1 watered down Red Shoe Diaries formula, because even though it's Knight Rider without the car, if they're determined to make this a Hasselhoff vehicle, make it a Hasselhoff vehicle, but maybe raise the stakes. There is a little known, and I tried to research this, but Google's not what it used to be. When Baywatch ended, before he got like on America's Got Talent and the whole cheeseburger incident and all that,
Yeah.
Hasselhoff was shopping around another show. It wasn't really named yet. I don't even know if it happens anymore, but there used to be this summit, kind of like Toy Fair, kind of like the upfronts for networks, where international buyers would come to this thing to invest in syndicated shows to take back to their countries. That was what had made Baywatch such a success. He was shopping around a project that essentially would have made him American James Bond. Everything that he wanted to be in season 1. He was God's gift to women. He would wear nothing but tuxedos. I think he lived on a yacht. Of course, nobody picked it up because it never saw the light of day. But that's the direction, like, you want a sexy David Hasselhoff vehicle? I'm going to give you a sexy David Hasselhoff vehicle. So I would take it back to season 1, and I would, because being who I am, the season 3 premiere would be something like, man, what was up with the past 22 weeks? You know? So that's one idea. Another idea would be to poke fun at it. You know, they didn't really do that back then, but this would be like a modern Tracy Wigfield kind of concept. Think of the implications of this double life. Now, a lifeguard is supposed to be like sharp and ready for anything, but this guy is moonlighting as a private eye. So it's like, I really want to show the effects of that. It's like he's sitting in his tower and he's just looking off in the distance about the weird crap he dealt with last night, and someone's drowning in the lower corner of the screen. You know, just kind of like this would be my The Office meets Baywatch, you know? Like, what do they do when they're not on the beach, you know? But if we're going to stick with the show as it is and evolve with the times, I am a continuity buff. And it bothered me when it was only into continuity when it helped the show. Mitch has a son. The son has been played by 2 different actors, one of whom went on to be JT on Step by Step. But Hobie Buchanan is a somewhat important character, but he never showed up in Nights. We're just supposed to assume, oh, that's the week he's with his mom. Well, at this point, Hobie's probably about 18, 19. I bring Hobie back. Hobie happens to have 3, 4 friends, and they've put this singing group together. It's the strangest thing. Like, Mitch didn't believe in them at first, but he saw their dance moves and he heard their harmonies. He was like, hey, you guys got something. So it's like, he would continue. We'll see where the Monster of the Week stuff takes him, but then we would also have a new musical act to perform at Nights, which we would reestablish as an important thing. In fact, Nights would be the centerpiece of any reboot or continuation I would do on this show, because it neglected a very important angle. New York Undercover was basically the 90s equivalent of Miami Vice, but set in New York and on Fox, right? But the thing about New York Undercover, it was just as important to music as Miami Vice was. New York Undercover gave exposure to a lot of R&B and hip hop acts when no one else would, because one of the cops' dad owned a nightclub. So, like, in every episode, it would be like, tonight's musical guest is R. Kelly, back when you could do that, or Missy Misdemeanor Elliott. People were exposed to new artists through this, almost like Saturday Night Live did. So I feel like that would have brought in viewers to Nights, kind of like with Skee-Lo, but better people. Like, them having Skee-Lo, it's laughable now, but when this aired, it's like, hey, it's that guy. So integrating more pop culture of the time into it probably would have helped it out, because as I said before, the numbers must have been horrible, because I don't see how this isn't at least a 3-season show.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there. And I'm also imagining, is Lou Pearlman becoming a producer with the Hasselhoff's Germany connection and taking all your boy bands to Germany to help them build a following? Like, that just feels like...
Possibly. Keep in mind, he's not a criminal yet.
So, Will, before we close out here, I just remembered I have to share my Baywatch connection that I neglected as we close out because, look, I didn't watch Baywatch, so I have no evidence of this. But on our Kids Incorporated episode, you said that there was a kid who, during the summers, said he was going off to be in Kids Incorporated. That was the rumor. And we had a guy in my high school theater department named Gil. And Gil had a little bit of a lisp, and he was very excited. He's like, oh, guys, this is great. And he loved doing Austin Powers impressions, but that was a new thing. He was that guy. But he had an agent, so he said, and on weekends, he was always out auditioning and getting roles. And I remember the day he came in and said, guys, I just filmed an episode of Baywatch. My brother is drowning, and they pull him out. And then I say, you got to save my brother. You got to help him. And I get a line on Baywatch, and I never saw it. That's the one reason I would go back now, is to just scan every episode, all 11 seasons. Was Gil on this episode?
He sounds like the kind of guy who would have created his own IMDb profile.
Yes.
So you could probably just find it that way and zero in on that episode. It'll say like Gil whatever uncredited.
I know. I have searched for him. I tried it. I did because I wanted to verify, but his stage name was Gil Peters, which was not his real last name. And there are several Gil Peters, and none of them appear to be him. So I don't know. But yeah, Baywatch and I did have some sort of crossover at some point. But, Will, we still have one more episode here in the Halloween season, and we're going to be hiding under the covers, quite possibly. Another spooky series is on the way. It's a one-season wonder, kind of lost to time, but recently has popped up on streaming, which is great. So you guys can find this. We are taking a trip to Middle America with Erie, Indiana. Are you looking forward to this one, Will? Do you have any connection?
I am, because this is one of those shows kind of like Pete and Pete, where like everybody our age loves it, and I have no frame of reference, and it's been put on this pedestal, so I'm bound to be disappointed, but I needed a reason to watch it, and this is a good one.
Yes, indeed. So make sure that you are there and subscribed. Where? Well, how about social media? Go find us at Remember Show Pod so you can get all the updates. We're sharing, a little behind the scenes pieces of details, plus the link to where you can find the show to watch. In this case with Erie, Indiana, it is on Tubi, so you can find it there. But also, we want you to find us on your favorite podcast app. If you're not subscribed yet, if you're not following the show, make sure that you're following us so each new episode pops up for you. Find the show, but spread the word. Tell people about Remember That Show, because there's a lot of people that might not know that we're talking about their favorite obscure television show, or at least they can come on board and recommend one for us. Will has a spreadsheet. He has many shows already, but we are open to suggestions here and there. But we thank you so much for checking out this episode. And until next time, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.